Lebanon's Parliament Speaker Nabil Berri sets January 9th as the date when the House will elect the country's next president. The High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy calls on the international community and especially the EU not to undermine the International Criminal Court. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia is selecting targets in Ukraine that could include decision-making centers in Kyiv. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time and you're watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanon's Parliament Speaker Nabil Berri has set January 9th date for the House to elect the country's president. Lebanon's Parliament will meet on January 9th to elect a new president seeking to end more than 2 years without a head of state, official Lebanese media reported today, a day after an Israeli Hezbollah ceasefire began. Israeli tank fire has hit 6 areas in southern Lebanon after Israeli officials claimed that the ceasefire with Hezbollah was breached when what it called suspects arrived at several areas in the southern zone. The round struck Markaba, Wazani and Kafr Shuba, Khiyam, Tayyiba and the agricultural plains around Merjayun, all of which lie within 2 kilometers of the blue line demarcating the border between Lebanon and Israel. One of the security sources said 2 people were wounded in Markaba. French presidential envoy Jean-Yves Le Drian has met with the Member of Parliament Sajah Atiyah, representing the National Moderation Parliamentary Bloc. Talks touch on the key affairs relevant to the Lebanese crisis, including development following the ceasefire and the priority of electing a president of the Republic. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon that took effect earlier was the first ray of hope in the regional conflict after months of escalation. Guterres said it is essential that those who signed the ceasefire commitment respected in full, adding that the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon was ready to monitor the ceasefire. He also reiterated his call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has continued to hold as it entered the second day. The US and France brokered deal approved by Israel late on Tuesday call for an initial 2 months halt to fighting and requires Hezbollah to end its armed presence in southern Lebanon while Israeli troops are to return to their side of the border. Thousands of additional Lebanese troops and UN peacekeepers will deploy in the south, and an international panel headed by the United States will monitor compliance. Traffic has streamed into Beirut's southern suburbs as some people returned to the area on the second day of a ceasefire. A ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah took effect under a deal brokered by the United States and France, allowing people in both countries to start returning to homes in a border area shattered by 14 months of fighting. Lebanese state media have reported 4 killed in a series of Israeli airstrikes targeted at 3 border crossings between Syria and Lebanon in northern Lebanon. The Israeli bombing caused great damage to the crossings, facilities and yards, in addition to burning several cars and trucks that were present at the site. Residents of the Dabusaya area said the war was brutal and caused terror for families living near the border crossing. And for more analysis, we now move to Salma Marwan in our newsroom. Salma.
Thank you so much, Mona. For further analysis on the latest developments in Lebanon, we are joined from Beirut by Rachel Karam, writer and journalist. Ms. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on Q News. Now, following Israel's violation of the ceasefire agreement after what it calls suspects arriving in vehicles in southern Lebanon, what are the repercussions of Israel violating the ceasefire?
Greetings, everybody. In fact, in the items of the agreement, the Israeli occupation forces are giving a 60-day time frame to withdraw completely from Lebanese lands, specifically from the eastern side of the borders. And the Al-Khiyam region, in fact, is a region in which Israeli tanks were observed. According to what's mentioned in the agreement, the Israeli occupation forces are going to stay deployed in place until the UNIFIL troops are going to be deployed within the course of 60 days. We acknowledge that the Israeli enemy is a stealth one and a party that does not at all abide by its promises. In fact, Israel launched a projectile under the pretext that there was some kind of infiltration into the borders, but it was just a bird, in fact, crossing this border area. And I believe that all the guaranteeing parties are going to observe the situation in order to prevent further escalation.
Now, Ms. Rachel, in light of the fact that the ceasefire agreement is brokered by the United States and France, what are the expected measures in the event of a violation of the ceasefire agreement?
يمكن أن نفهمها. The brokerage, the American brokerage, has played a major role in demarking maritime borders between Israel and Lebanon a couple of years ago. And today, and before the 7th of October, the Americans, through Hochstein, were working on the demarcation subject between Lebanon and Israel, because there are a lot of problematic issues regarding this whole demarcation. In fact, the United States has always been a friendly mother towards Israel, and it's going to always support it no matter what. And regarding the French side, France, Germany, and Britain were actually going to broker this agreement, but Germany and Britain were rejected to take part in this agreement by Lebanon. But Lebanon, in fact, abode by France and considers France some kind of a friendly mother towards Lebanon, just as Israel considers the United States to be her or its own motherly figure. And so we can only say that there are some guarantees provided for us through the French side, but definitely.
Now, Ms. Rachel, sorry for interrupting you due to shortage of time, but lastly, I would like to ask you, how might the upcoming Lebanon presidential election in January shape the country's approach to the ceasefire with Israel and broader regional tensions?
The head of the Lebanese parliament allocated a session to elect a president for Lebanon. And in fact, this is what was mentioned before by the chair of the Lebanese parliament. On the 9th of January, this session is going to be held to elect a president, and that's a message conveyed to the Israelis and the international community that Lebanon is using some kind of a pressure card, that Lebanon is going to make sure that the guarantees are being abided by and are being respected regarding the ceasefire agreement.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rachel, for all the information you provided with. Thank you so much for being with us. Now we're going to move back to Mona for more news and developments around the world.
Thank you so much, Salma. And back to our bulletin, where convoys of military vehicles have been seen heading towards the Israeli-Lebanese border from the southern port city. Thousands of displaced people poured back into the Lebanese city of Tyre, including the Lebanese army. The ceasefire has brought relief across the Mediterranean nation, coming after days of some of the most intense airstrikes and clashes since the war began. Residents in Tyre have said they were hoping for better days after Israeli Hezbollah ceasefire. The Israeli military has urged residents of towns along the border strip not to return yet for their own safety. The Lebanese army urged returning residents not to approach areas where Israeli forces were present for their own safety. of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, has called on the international community, especially the European Union, not to undermine the International Criminal Court. Borrell said that supporting the International Criminal Court and strengthening its decisions is the only way to achieve justice in the world. He added that Netanyahu's government is trampling on international law and violating international humanitarian law, stressing that what is happening in Gaza is a flagrant violation of human rights. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has said he believed that the United States would punish the International Criminal Court for having issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister. Israel has said it will appeal the ICC decision to move against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza conflict. But during a visit to the Czech Republic, Saar said other countries were also dismayed by the decision, including the United States. Saar added that Israel would finish the 14-month-old war in Gaza when it achieves its objectives of returning detainees being held.
From Washington, and I tend to believe that
Israeli military strikes have killed at least 17 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip. In Nusayrat, Israeli planes carried out several airstrikes, destroying a multi-floor building and hitting roads outside mosques. At least 7 people were killed in some of those strikes. Medics said at least 2 people, a woman and a child, were killed in a tank shelling that hit western areas of Nusayrat, while an airstrike killed 5 others in a house nearby. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said implementing the two-state solution, which includes establishing an independent Palestinian state with full sovereignty based on the 1967 borders and East Jerusalem as its capital, is fundamental for peace in Palestine. Xi underlined the urgency of ending the war and easing regional tensions by fully implementing relevant UN Security Council resolutions. The Chinese leader reaffirmed China's support for the Palestinian people's legitimate rights, including their right to statehood, existence and return. He also called for Palestine's full UN membership and the convening of an inclusive and effective international peace conference. Reuters reported that the Biden administration is advancing a $680 million arms deal with Israel despite a recent ceasefire with Hezbollah, as tensions continue to persist in the region.
A U.S. official confirmed that the Biden administration is moving forward with a $680 million arms package to Israel, despite the recent ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Reuters reported. The arms deal, initially reported by British media, includes thousands of joint direct attack munition kits and hundreds of small-diameter bombs. An official, speaking anonymously, highlighted the timing. Less than a day after the ceasefire ended the most intense clashes in years between Israel and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Israel continues its offensive military campaign in the Gaza Strip. This latest package follows a larger $20 billion sale in August, which involved fighter jets and other military hardware. Additionally, Reuters reported in June that the U.S. has supplied Israel with over 10,000 2,000-pound bombs and thousands of Hellfire missiles since the war in Gaza began in October 2023. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cited the need to replenish Israel's weapon reserves as a key factor in agreeing to the ceasefire. He stated there have been significant delays in weapons and munitions deliveries. However, These delays will be resolved soon. According to the U.S. official, the arms deal has been in preparation for months. It was initially reviewed by congressional committees in September and formally submitted for review in October. The advancement of this $680 million arm deal highlights the complex dynamics of U.S. support for Israel amid ongoing regional tensions. With congressional review processes in motion, the international community is closely watching how these developments impact efforts toward lasting peace and security in the region.
President Vladimir Putin has said Russia is selecting targets in Ukraine that could include decision-making centers in Kyiv in response to Ukrainian long-range strikes on Russian territory with Western weapons. Putin told a meeting of a security alliance of ex-Soviet countries in Kazakhstan said Russia will respond to ongoing strikes on Russian territory with long-range Western-made missiles, including by possibly continuing to test the Arctic in combat conditions, as was done in November 21st. Russia Deputy UN Ambassador has said any decision by President-elect Donald Trump's incoming administration to cut support for Ukraine would be a death sentence for the Ukrainian army. Speaking to the UN Security Council, Dmitry Polensky accused the outgoing Biden administration of trying through its increased support to Ukraine to create a mess both in Russia and with the new team in the White House. Polensky said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was terrified of the return of Trump in January and had reason to be so. Russia's launched a widespread missile attack on Ukraine. All regions of Ukraine were under air raid alert early Thursday amid Russia's latest long-range drone and missile barrage against the country's energy grid, with almost 1 million people reportedly left without power. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia launched around 100 drones and more than 90 missiles into Ukraine, including projectile carrying cluster munitions. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri sets January 9th as the date when the House will elect the country's next president. The High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy calls on the international community, especially the EU, not to undermine the International Criminal Court. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia is selecting targets in Ukraine that could include decision-making centers in Kyiv. Well, this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.